Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the English Talk community. I'm your host, Julia, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today. Whether you're a longtime listener or this is your first time tuning in, I want to thank you for being part of this amazing community. It's truly wonderful to have people from all over the world joining us as we work together to improve our English skills and build fluency. If you've been following us for a while, you already know that our goal is to make learning English an enjoyable and rewarding experience. And if you're new to the podcast, I'm really excited to have you along on this journey. Here at the English Talk community, we believe in helping each other, supporting each other's growth, and, of course, having a little fun along the way. Now, before we dive into today's topic, I just want to take a moment to thank you for all your support. I've seen your comments, your messages, and your feedback, and it means the world to me. This community is only possible because of you. So if you're enjoying the podcast and find the content helpful, please don't forget to subscribe. By doing that, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll get access to even more tips, stories, and lessons to help you improve your English. Plus, subscribing really helps spread the word and allows us to reach more people who can benefit from what we're doing here. Okay, so let's talk about today's episode. I'm sure you've all had moments when you felt a little stuck with your English listening skills, right? Maybe you've been watching an English movie, trying to follow a conversation, or listening to a podcast, and suddenly you realize you've missed the point completely. You're hearing the words, but they just don't make sense. Or perhaps the speed of the conversation feels overwhelming, and you wish you could keep up better. If that sounds familiar, then today's episode is definitely for you. Our focus today is going to be on one simple yet incredibly effective skill: improving your English listening fast. I know it can feel like a slow process at times, but trust me, there are practical and achievable strategies that will help you get better faster, and I'm going to share them with you today. The best part? These strategies are simple and easy to incorporate into your everyday life. You don't need to spend hours in a classroom or be glued to your textbooks to see progress. Instead, you can start practicing right now, using things you already do, whether you're commuting, cooking, exercising, or even relaxing. It's all about making small, consistent efforts that will add up over time. And I promise you, those small efforts will make a big difference. In fact, the goal of today's episode is to help you develop a listening routine that works for you. You'll learn how to incorporate English into your daily activities, even when you're busy. Whether you're an intermediate learner or still working through the basics, these tips will help you take your listening skills to the next level and feel more confident when you hear English in real life. But before we dive into the strategies, I want to remind you of something really important. Learning English is a process, and it's okay if you don't understand everything right away. What matters most is that you keep going and stay committed to your practice. English is spoken differently by different people, in different places, with different accents, and that's something that makes the language so rich and interesting. The key is to expose yourself to as much variety as possible, and to stay patient with yourself as you improve. In today's episode, I'll be sharing some real-life stories of people just like you who faced challenges with their listening skills but found ways to overcome them. You'll hear how they tackled their struggles, what worked for them, and how you can apply the same strategies to your own learning journey. But first, let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt frustrated by how quickly people speak in English? Maybe you've been in a situation where you're listening to a conversation and you feel like they're speaking too fast, or you just can't keep up. It happens to everyone, and it's totally normal to feel this way. The important thing is to not let that frustration stop you from practicing. The more you listen, the more your brain will adjust to the rhythm of the language, and before you know it, those fast-paced conversations won't seem as overwhelming. Throughout this episode, I'll give you plenty of practical advice, but also remember that the key to improvement is consistency. Try to make English a part of your daily routine, and don't worry if you don't get it perfectly right away. The more you listen, the more your understanding will grow. This process may feel slow at times, but over time you'll notice significant improvements in your ability to follow conversations and understand native speakers. So, are you ready to get started? I'm excited to dive into today's episode and share with you some really effective ways to improve your listening skills fast. Let's jump in. In today's episode, we're diving into something that I know many of you have been struggling with: improving your English listening skills, and more specifically, how you can do it quickly. It's one of the most common challenges I hear about from learners of all levels, especially those of you who are at an intermediate stage in your learning journey. You understand English when you read it or see it written down, but when it comes to listening, it feels like everything goes too fast. The words get jumbled together, and you're left trying to catch up. Sound familiar? Well, you're not alone. This is a challenge many people face when they are learning a new language. It's easy to get frustrated when you can't follow conversations in movies, TV shows, or even in real-life situations. But the good news is that there's a way to improve your listening skills fast, and it doesn't involve spending hours every day in front of textbooks or listening to boring, repetitive exercises. The key to improving your listening quickly is to integrate listening into your everyday life in ways that are simple, easy to follow, and, most importantly, fun. Now, before we get into the specifics of how you can improve your listening skills, I want to talk about why listening is so important in the first place. When you're learning a new language, listening is the foundation of communication. Yes, speaking and writing are crucial, but without understanding what others are saying, it's hard to participate in conversations. That's why listening is one of the most important skills you need to develop to become fluent. It's not just about hearing words. It's about understanding the meaning behind those words, the tone, the context, and even the body language that comes with it. But here's the thing. Improving your listening doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, and it requires consistent practice. The good news, though, is that you can make this process much faster by focusing on a few simple, practical strategies that you can incorporate into your daily life. I'm talking about things that don't require hours of studying or forcing yourself to sit down and do drills. Instead, I'm going to show you how to use the things you already do every day to create a listening practice that works for you. One of the biggest challenges people face with listening is that it can feel overwhelming. English is spoken at different speeds by different people, with different accents, and sometimes it feels like it's hard to keep up. That's totally normal. The speed of speech in movies, for instance, can be much faster than what you'll hear in a typical conversation, and understanding different accents can add another layer of difficulty. But that doesn't mean you can't improve. In fact, it's all about consistent exposure. The more you listen to English, the more your brain will adapt to understanding it naturally. So the first step in improving your listening is to make listening to English a regular part of your life. This doesn't mean you have to sit down and dedicate hours to it every day, but rather, find ways to incorporate English into the activities you already do. This could mean listening to a podcast on your way to work, or while you're cleaning, cooking, or exercising. You'd be surprised how much you can learn just by having English audio in the background of your daily tasks. The goal is to surround yourself with English as much as possible so that your brain starts to adjust to the sounds and rhythms of the language. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but how do I know what to listen to? Great question. There's so many options out there, and the key is to choose content that interests you and is relevant to your level. If you're an intermediate learner, you don't want to jump straight into advanced level podcasts or movies with fast dialogue. Instead, start with content that matches your current understanding of English, but still challenges you a little. This could be podcasts, news clips, YouTube videos, or even audiobooks. The idea is to find something that's engaging and enjoyable, so you're motivated to keep listening. And here's another tip. Don't be afraid to use subtitles or transcripts when you're starting out. It's totally okay to rely on these tools while you're building your listening skills. In fact, they can be incredibly helpful. They allow you to see the words as you hear them, which helps your brain make connections between spoken and written English. Over time, you can start to wean yourself off subtitles as your listening improves, but in the beginning, they can be a great crutch to help you understand what's being said. Now, you may also be wondering, but what about understanding fast speakers? What if I can't keep up with them? Again, this is completely normal. Native speakers often talk quickly, and the way they link words together can be confusing for learners. But here's where practice comes in. The more you listen, the more you'll get used to the rhythm of the language, and over time, the speed of the speech will become less of an obstacle. If you're listening to something and you don't catch every word, don't stress about it. Just focus on the general meaning and the context. It's perfectly fine to miss a word here and there. It's all part of the learning process. One of the most effective ways to improve your listening skills quickly is to listen to the same content repeatedly. This might sound a bit repetitive, but trust me, it works. When you listen to the same podcast episode, video, or audiobook multiple times, you'll start to notice things you didn't hear the first time. This helps your brain get more accustomed to the sounds, and it reinforces the vocabulary and phrases you're learning. It's like building muscle memory for your ears. So, to recap, the goal here is to listen to English as much as possible, using content that is both interesting and appropriate for your level. And the more you practice, the more comfortable you'll become with the language. But remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. If you're consistent, if you make listening a regular part of your life, you will see improvement. And it won't take as long as you might think. In today's episode, I'm going to share some tips and strategies that will help you incorporate listening practice into your daily routine. These are things you can start doing today, and you'll begin to notice changes in your listening skills quickly. It's all about making listening to English a natural and enjoyable part of your day. You don't need to overthink it. Just start listening. I want to start today's episode by asking you a few questions. These questions are important because they'll help us dive into the heart of what we're going to talk about today: how to improve your listening skills in English. So, take a moment and think about this. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're listening to someone speaking English and you just can't keep up? Maybe you're in a conversation with a native speaker, or you're watching a movie, and suddenly everything seems to be moving too fast. The words blur together and you're left trying to catch up, but it feels impossible. Does that sound familiar? I'm sure many of you have had moments like this, and I know how frustrating it can be. You understand what people are saying in theory, but when it comes to actually hearing it in real time, it feels like you just can't make sense of it. So, I want to ask, how do you feel when you're in these situations? Does it make you anxious? Do you start doubting your ability to understand English, thinking, I should be getting this by now? Or maybe you just feel frustrated? It's completely normal to feel this way, but it's also something we can work through. Let's talk about it a bit more. Have you ever watched a TV show or movie in English and you found yourself rewinding the scene several times, hoping to catch that one sentence you missed? Maybe you tried listening to a podcast or a news clip and you realized that you could barely follow the conversation because the speaker was talking so fast. What did you do in that moment? Did you try to focus harder? Or did you let it go and move on to something else? I know it can be tempting to give up when things get difficult, but I want to encourage you not to. There are ways to improve your listening skills, and they don't require perfection or hours of hard work. But to do that, it's important to first understand how you feel when you're struggling and what strategies you've already tried to improve your listening. Have you already tried listening to content repeatedly? Or maybe you've tried using subtitles or slowing down the audio? Sometimes we get so caught up in wanting to understand everything perfectly that we forget that improving our listening is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. It's something that takes time, patience, and most importantly, practice. And guess what? It's okay to not understand everything right away. If you've ever had moments where you just couldn't keep up, I want you to know you're not alone. This happens to everyone at some point, even to native speakers when they're listening to accents they're not used to, or in situations where the speech is too fast. So, I'd love to know, have you ever tried specific techniques to improve your listening skills? Have you set aside time to listen to English every day, or do you find it hard to stay consistent? Think about the different ways you encounter English in your daily life. Maybe you watch English language YouTube videos, listen to music, or follow English-speaking podcasts. What kind of content are you listening to, and how do you feel when you're listening? Are you understanding most of it? Or are there certain areas that always trip you up? For example, do you struggle more with understanding the main idea of what's being said? Or is it the smaller details, like understanding the words and phrases that are being used? Also, let's not forget about accents. English is spoken in so many different ways around the world, and sometimes, hearing an accent you're not familiar with can throw you off. If you've ever found it difficult to understand someone with a strong accent, you're definitely not alone. Even native English speakers sometimes have trouble understanding accents that are unfamiliar to them. So think about it. Have you ever encountered an accent that made it harder for you to understand? Maybe you've listened to someone from the UK, Australia, or the US, and you've had to work a little harder to follow the conversation. How did you handle that? I'm asking all these questions because I want you to reflect on your experiences. I know it can feel discouraging when listening to English feels like such a challenge, but the truth is that with a little focus and consistent practice, you can overcome these difficulties. And the first step is understanding where you're at right now. What is your biggest obstacle? Is it the speed at which people speak? The complexity of their sentences? The vocabulary? Or is it the sheer amount of new information coming at you all at once? Now, let's take a moment to think about the techniques you might have already tried. Have you ever used repetition as a technique? For example, Have you listened to the same podcast episode or watched the same video multiple times to improve your understanding? Some people find that when they listen to the same content more than once, they start to pick up on things they missed the first time. Other people find that using transcripts or subtitles helps them connect the spoken words with the written ones. Have any of you used these tools to help with your listening practice? If so, how effective did you find them? Another question I want to ask is, how comfortable are you with making mistakes? It's easy to get discouraged when you don't understand everything, but learning a language is all about trial and error. No one becomes fluent without making mistakes, and sometimes even the most advanced learners miss a word or two. So, how do you handle these moments of confusion? Do you keep going, or do you stop and try to figure it out right away? The key is to keep going and not get stuck in the moment. Remember, every time you listen, even if you don't fully understand, you're still making progress. I really want you to reflect on these questions because the answers will give you a better understanding of where you stand in terms of your listening skills. And once we recognize where we are, we can take small, manageable steps to improve. So, what do you think? Are you ready to start incorporating some simple techniques into your daily routine to improve your listening, or do you feel like you need a little more guidance first? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, so feel free to think about these questions as we move forward in today's episode. When we're learning a new language, especially one like English, one of the most important things we can do to improve our skills is simply to listen. I can't stress this enough. Listening is the foundation of language learning. The more you listen, the better you'll get at understanding the language, even if it feels challenging at first. Now, I know that many of you probably already listen to English here and there. Maybe you watch a few YouTube videos in English, or listen to music in English. But here's the thing, it's not just about occasionally hearing the language. To make real progress, you need to incorporate listening into your everyday life. It needs to become a habit, something you do regularly, almost without thinking about it. Why is listening so important? Well, think of it this way. When you're learning to speak, you're not only learning how to form sentences, you're also learning how to recognize the rhythm, the tone, and the flow of the language. English is not just a series of words strung together. It's a living, breathing thing that changes depending on where you are, who you're talking to, and the situation you're in. By listening to the language as much as possible, you'll start to pick up on these nuances. You'll start to hear how words are connected, how native speakers emphasize certain syllables, and how the meaning of a sentence can change depending on how it's said. Let's talk about the rhythm of the language. English is a stress-timed language, which means that certain words, usually the important ones, are stressed, while other, less important words are said more quickly or even dropped altogether. This can make English hard to follow at first because in many other languages, words are pronounced more evenly. For example, in languages like Spanish or Italian, each syllable is given roughly the same amount of time. But English isn't like that. Native speakers don't say every word with equal emphasis. This is why when you first start listening to English, it may seem like the words are all blending together, especially in fast conversations. But by listening more, you start to develop an ear for these patterns. You'll begin to understand what's important in a sentence and what's not. Now, let's not forget about accents. English is spoken by people all over the world, and there are many different accents and variations of the language. You've probably heard a British accent, an American accent, or even an Australian accent. Each of these accents has its own particular rhythm, pronunciation, and style of speaking. And let's not even get started on the different regional accents within each country. For instance, in the UK, someone from London might sound very different from someone from Liverpool. The same goes for the United States. Someone from New York might sound completely different from someone from Texas. If you only listen to one accent, you might struggle to understand other accents when you come across them in real life. But by exposing yourself to different accents regularly, you'll get used to the variety of ways English can sound. And, as a result, your comprehension will improve across the board. Another important aspect of listening is hearing the expressions, idioms, and colloquialisms that native speakers use. English is full of phrases that don't always make sense when translated literally. Phrases like break the ice, kick the bucket, or let the cat out of the bag are common in everyday speech. If you don't listen to English regularly, you might miss these expressions or misunderstand them when you do hear them. But when you expose yourself to the language consistently, you'll start to recognize these idiomatic expressions and understand what they really mean. This will help you not only understand conversations better, but also sound more natural when you speak. Listening regularly also helps you become more comfortable with the pace at which people speak. In the beginning, English might sound like it's being spoken too fast, and you might feel like you can't keep up. This is a common challenge for language learners, and it's perfectly normal to feel this way. But the good news is that the more you listen, the easier it becomes to follow fast speech. Your brain starts to process the words more quickly, and you begin to hear and understand the meaning even if the speaker isn't slowing down for you. This is because your brain becomes more accustomed to the patterns of speech, and it starts to anticipate what's coming next. Think of it like training a muscle. At first, it's hard, but over time, it gets easier. One of the best things about listening to English in your everyday life is that you don't have to spend hours doing it. You can listen while you're doing other things. For example, you can listen to podcasts or audiobooks while you're walking, cleaning, cooking, or driving. You can watch English language TV shows or movies while you relax at home. The key is consistency. Even if you only listen for a few minutes every day, it adds up over time. And the more you expose yourself to English, the more your brain will absorb. You might not notice the improvement right away, but after a few weeks or months, you'll start to see the progress. Another thing to keep in mind is that not all listening practice is the same. If you want to improve quickly, it's important to choose content that's right for your level. If you're just starting out, it might be helpful to listen to slower, simpler English, like podcasts made specifically for learners. But as you improve, you can gradually challenge yourself with more complex content, like news broadcasts, movies, or conversations between native speakers. The more varied your listening material, the more you'll learn. But don't overwhelm yourself by jumping into something too difficult. Start with what's manageable, and then work your way up. It's also helpful to mix things up. If you always listen to the same type of content, like news broadcasts, you might get good at understanding that particular style of speech, but you could struggle when you're listening to something different, like a casual conversation or a movie. That's why it's important to listen to a variety of accents, speeds, and contexts. This will help you become more versatile in your listening skills and prepare you for real-world situations. Lastly, I want to emphasize that it's okay if you don't understand everything you hear. Language learning is a gradual process, and you won't be able to catch every word right away. The key is to listen actively. Pay attention to the context of the conversation, the tone of the speaker, and the words you do understand. Over time, you'll start to fill in the gaps and improve your overall comprehension. So don't be discouraged if things sound unclear at first. Keep listening, and it will start to make sense. By incorporating more English listening into your daily life, you'll start to notice improvements in your comprehension, your vocabulary, and your ability to follow conversations. It won't happen overnight, but with consistent practice, you'll see the results. So, start today. Listen to something in English, whether it's a podcast, a movie, or a conversation, and just let yourself absorb the language. The more you do this, the more natural it will feel, and soon enough, you'll be understanding English with ease. One of the most important things I want to talk about today is the power of daily practice. If you're serious about improving your English, especially your listening skills, then consistency is absolutely key. You've probably heard the phrase, practice makes perfect, and while we know that perfect isn't always the goal, the idea behind it is incredibly valuable. Regular practice, even if it's just for a few minutes a day, can make a huge difference in your ability to understand spoken English. It might not feel like much in the beginning, but the more you do it, the more progress you'll see. I understand that it can be tough to find the time for language practice, especially if you have a busy life with work, school, or family responsibilities. But the beauty of improving your listening skills in English is that you don't need hours of focused study every day. It's not about cramming or trying to memorize vocabulary lists. It's about making small but consistent efforts that you can easily integrate into your daily routine. Imagine this. Just a few minutes of listening to English every single day can add up to big improvements over time. You don't have to sit down for an hour to make progress. Instead, try to fit short listening sessions into your day whenever you have a few spare minutes. It's a simple concept, really. The more you expose yourself to English, the more your brain starts to absorb the language, even when you're not actively studying. Think about it. If you listen to English while you're making breakfast, or maybe while you're commuting to work or school, you're still engaging with the language. And that's a win. It's a way to make sure that you're constantly surrounding yourself with English, even if you're not actively focusing on it. Over time, this consistent exposure will help you become more familiar with the rhythms and sounds of the language. Now, I know it might be tempting to think, Well, I don't have time for this. I need to dedicate an hour to listening if I'm going to get better. But here's the thing. That's just not true. The idea that you need to spend long hours studying or listening is a myth. It's all about consistency and finding small windows of time throughout your day. A few minutes here and there can really add up. It's like exercising your body. If you go to the gym once a week for an hour, you might not see the results you want. But if you make it a habit and exercise every day, even for just 10 or 15 minutes, you'll start to see real changes. The same principle applies to language learning. The key is to make listening to English a regular part of your day. Creating a routine is one of the best ways to ensure that you're practicing consistently. And by routine, I mean making it a natural part of your day, not something that feels forced or like a chore. For example, let's say you usually spend 20 minutes each morning drinking coffee or eating breakfast. Instead of scrolling through social media or checking emails, why not use that time to listen to a short podcast episode in English? It could be something related to your interests, or maybe a podcast specifically designed for language learners. That way, you're not only practicing your listening skills, but you're also learning something new and interesting in the process. It's a great way to kill two birds with one stone. Another way to integrate English listening into your day is by making it part of your commute. Whether you're driving, taking the bus, or walking to work or school, this is a perfect time to listen to English content. Audiobooks, podcasts, or even news broadcasts in English can keep you engaged and help you improve your listening comprehension while you go about your routine. And the best part is that you don't need to stop what you're doing to focus. You're already moving, so why not use that time to practice? Let's not forget about multitasking either. If you're doing household chores, like washing dishes or cleaning, you can also take advantage of that time. Put on a podcast or listen to an audiobook in English while you go about your tasks. At first, it might feel strange to listen while doing something else, but you'd be surprised at how much your brain can absorb without you even realizing it. As you continue to listen, you'll start picking up words, phrases, and even accents that you hadn't noticed before. Over time, this constant exposure will help you become more comfortable with hearing English in various contexts. When you're starting to build a daily practice routine, it's important to choose materials that suit your current level. If you're just beginning, you might want to start with slower, simpler English, something that's easy to understand and doesn't overwhelm you. As you get more comfortable, you can gradually increase the difficulty by listening to faster content or more advanced topics. This kind of gradual progression will help you build your listening skills without becoming frustrated or feeling lost. Remember, it's better to start slow and build up than to jump into something too difficult right away. This is where the consistency comes in. Even if you only listen to short segments of content at first, the important thing is that you're practicing every day. Another factor to keep in mind is variety. It's essential to expose yourself to different types of content to get a well-rounded understanding of the language. For example, try mixing up what you listen to. Sometimes listen to a podcast, other times watch a TV show, or listen to a movie in English. Even listening to different accents and styles of speaking is incredibly helpful. As you know, English is spoken all over the world, and there are so many different ways people say the same things. If you only listen to one type of content, you might miss out on understanding how people speak in different contexts. By diversifying your listening materials, you'll develop a more flexible understanding of English and be better prepared for real-world conversations. You may also want to consider using resources that help you actively engage with what you're listening to. For example, there are apps and websites that allow you to slow down the audio or provide transcripts so you can follow along. If you don't understand a word or phrase, you can look it up or rewind the audio to hear it again. This kind of active engagement is important because it allows you to learn new words, phrases, and expressions in context, which will help you remember them more effectively. It's all about connecting what you hear with what you understand and expanding your vocabulary along the way. If you can commit to practicing English listening every day, even for just 10 or 15 minutes, you'll start to notice improvements more quickly than you might expect. The key to this daily practice is not to worry about perfection. Don't focus on understanding every single word. Instead, focus on getting used to the flow of the language. Listen to the rhythm of how native speakers talk, pick up on common expressions, and learn to recognize familiar words in different contexts. Over time, you'll become more comfortable with listening to English, and your ability to understand it will improve significantly. Remember, the most important thing is to make English a regular part of your day. The more you surround yourself with the language, the faster you'll see results. Whether you listen while you work, study, or relax, make the most of every moment to practice. It's this daily exposure that will help you make steady progress and eventually feel more confident in your listening skills. So what are you waiting for? Start today. Incorporate English listening into your routine and see how much better you'll get. Let me tell you a story about Anna, a student of English who lives in Madrid. Anna is in her early 20s, and like many of you, she had a strong desire to improve her English. She had been learning the language for a few years in school, taking regular lessons and practicing the grammar and vocabulary. But as much as she worked hard on her written English, there was one area where she was struggling: listening. Anna often found herself feeling insecure when it came to understanding conversations in English. It wasn't that she didn't know the words. She was familiar with most of them. The problem came when she tried to follow fast conversations in movies or videos. It was as if the words would blur together, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't catch everything that was being said. She would listen to people speaking, and sometimes it felt like they were talking in a completely different language. It wasn't that she couldn't recognize individual words, but when they came together in rapid speech, it was overwhelming. One day, Anna was watching a popular English language movie with her friends. She had already seen this movie in Spanish, so she knew the storyline and what was supposed to happen. But when it came time for the English version, she felt completely lost. The characters spoke quickly, and their words seemed to overlap. Even though she could catch a few words here and there, she couldn't understand enough to follow the conversation or enjoy the movie fully. It was frustrating, and after a while, she started to feel like her efforts to improve her listening skills weren't getting her anywhere. She also noticed this problem during her English classes. The teacher would speak in English, and while Anna could understand the basic ideas, when other students would speak, especially in group discussions or when watching videos, Anna's mind would start to wander. She would focus on trying to pick out individual words, but the speed of the conversations made it hard for her to keep up. This left her feeling insecure and sometimes even embarrassed. She began to question whether she would ever be able to understand native speakers as easily as her classmates seemed to do. Anna wasn't the only one who faced these challenges. In fact, it's a common problem among language learners. Many students struggle with understanding spoken English, especially when it's spoken quickly or in more informal settings. What Anna didn't realize at first was that this difficulty wasn't a sign of failure. It was a normal part of the language learning process. Everyone, at some point, faces challenges with listening comprehension. Native speakers, even those who have been speaking English their whole lives, can sometimes find it difficult to understand others when they speak quickly, use slang, or have strong accents. So it's no wonder that a non-native speaker like Anna would find this particularly difficult. The turning point for Anna came when she decided to take a more practical approach to improving her listening skills. Instead of trying to listen to fast-paced movies or videos right away, she decided to start small. Anna started listening to English content at a slower pace. She found podcasts, audiobooks, and YouTube channels designed for English learners. These resources spoke slowly and clearly, giving her the opportunity to catch every word without feeling rushed. She also discovered that by slowing down the speed of the audio in some of these tools, she could listen at a pace that was comfortable for her. At first, Anna felt frustrated by how slow the audio was. She thought that if she kept listening at a slower speed, she wouldn't improve her real-world listening skills. But she soon realized that it was all about building a foundation. The slower pace gave her the time to recognize and internalize words and phrases. It allowed her to focus on understanding the context of the conversations and to get comfortable with the rhythm of spoken English. After a few weeks, Anna felt more confident. She could understand more than she had expected, and her confidence grew each day. She also started to listen to podcasts that were a little faster, gradually increasing the speed as her comprehension improved. The key moment came when Anna decided to challenge herself by watching a movie in English, just like she had done before. But this time, she wasn't as nervous. She knew that it wouldn't be easy, but she had been practicing regularly with the slower content. She had been building her listening skills little by little. As she watched the movie, she found that she could understand more of the dialogue. Sure, there were still moments when the fast speech caught her off guard, but overall, she could follow the storyline and get the gist of what was being said. That feeling of frustration started to fade, replaced by a sense of accomplishment. Anna also realized that it wasn't just about understanding every word. In fact, trying to understand every single word in a conversation can actually hold you back. It's better to focus on understanding the general meaning and context of what is being said. Once you get the overall message, you'll be able to connect the dots and fill in the gaps. And the more you practice, the easier this becomes. One of the most important lessons Anna learned was the value of consistency. At first, she wasn't sure that small daily practices would make a big difference, but she soon saw that they really did. She had built a routine of listening to English every day, even if it was only for a few minutes. She would listen while cooking, while cleaning, or during her commute. She started to notice small improvements each day, and eventually, those small improvements added up to a big change in her ability to understand spoken English. Anna's story is an example of the challenges that many language learners face, but it also shows how persistence and smart practice can make a huge difference. It's easy to feel overwhelmed when you're not understanding everything you hear, but remember that it's normal. The key is to keep going, find the right resources for your level, and give yourself time to improve. Whether you're struggling with understanding fast speech or just trying to catch up to the flow of a conversation, know that it's all part of the learning process. Anna didn't give up, and neither should you. Like her, you can build your listening skills one small step at a time. Anna's journey with learning English wasn't easy, and like many others, she found that there was a significant challenge that seemed to stand in her way. Despite having a solid understanding of individual words and phrases, one major hurdle was her struggle to understand the meaning of conversations when spoken quickly. This difficulty was particularly frustrating for her, especially when trying to engage in real conversations with native speakers. She felt that even though she knew what some of the words meant, the fast-paced nature of real-life conversations made it almost impossible to put everything together. One of the most challenging moments for Anna was when she was in a group conversation with her friends, who were all fluent in English. Anna would try to follow the discussion, but as they spoke, it felt as though the words were coming at her too fast. She could catch individual words here and there, but the overall meaning escaped her. It wasn't just that she was missing a word or two. She found that she couldn't keep up with the flow of the conversation. People would move from one topic to the next, and Anna couldn't get a handle on the bigger picture. She didn't have time to process one sentence before the next one came, and this left her feeling lost and disconnected from the conversation. As Anna continued to immerse herself in more English-speaking environments, this issue became more pronounced. She would listen to podcasts or watch English shows, and while she understood some of the vocabulary, the speed at which native speakers talked made it difficult to follow along. This was especially noticeable in informal settings, where the speech wasn't as slow or clear as it might have been in a classroom. People would use slang, idiomatic expressions, and phrasal verbs that Anna hadn't encountered before. This made the language feel even more foreign to her. In these situations, Anna would feel the pressure to keep up. When others spoke quickly, she couldn't react fast enough, and this caused her to become anxious. She feared that if she tried to participate in the conversation, she might say something wrong or not understand the response. This fear of making mistakes kept her from speaking up. She'd often stay silent, nodding along or simply smiling in an attempt to fit in. But the more she avoided speaking, the more she felt isolated from the group. It became clear to her that while she knew English, understanding it when spoken rapidly was a different challenge altogether. This struggle led to self-doubt. Anna would question whether she was really improving. After all, if she could not understand native speakers in a fast-paced conversation, how could she ever expect to communicate effectively? She would think, maybe I'm just not good enough at this. And this led to frustration. At times, Anna even thought about giving up because the gap between what she knew and what she could understand felt too wide to bridge. She questioned her progress, unsure if her efforts were enough to overcome this significant challenge. The more she tried, the more she felt defeated. Anna wasn't alone in feeling this way. Many language learners face the same frustration when it comes to understanding rapid speech. It's one thing to learn vocabulary and grammar in a classroom setting, but understanding how native speakers talk in natural, fast-paced conversations is a whole other skill. The rapid-fire way that native speakers often deliver their sentences can make it feel impossible to keep up, especially when they speak informally or use slang. Another factor that made Anna's struggle harder was her environment. In Madrid, where Anna lived, many people spoke English, but there was still a lot of Spanish spoken around her. While this helped her feel comfortable in her daily life, it also meant that she wasn't always getting enough exposure to natural English conversations. She realized that the more time she spent listening to Spanish, the harder it became to get used to hearing English at a faster speed. Her comfort zone became the slower, more structured English she heard in class, which wasn't helping her improve her listening comprehension in real-life situations. What made Anna's situation even more difficult was the fear of making mistakes. She believed that her inability to understand fast conversations meant she wasn't fluent enough. This fear of sounding incorrect or misunderstanding something kept her from practicing her speaking skills. She thought, if I don't understand everything, I'll mess up. And as a result, she avoided engaging in conversations where she might have to respond quickly. The anxiety of making mistakes became a barrier that held her back from actively participating in English discussions, even when she had the chance to practice. This is a common scenario for many learners, especially when it comes to understanding native speakers. The faster pace of real-life conversations can make it difficult for learners to feel confident. It's not enough to know the meaning of individual words. Understanding how they fit together in a natural conversation takes time and practice. This is especially true when the speakers use idiomatic expressions, cultural references, or slang that you may not be familiar with. It's not just about hearing the words. It's about understanding them in context, which is a skill that often takes longer to develop. Anna's experience was a clear example of how important it is to be patient with yourself and to realize that it's okay to feel challenged. Understanding spoken English at a fast pace doesn't happen overnight, and it's perfectly normal to struggle with it at first. Just because Anna wasn't understanding everything she heard didn't mean she was failing. It just meant she was in the process of learning. It's natural to feel overwhelmed when you're faced with the fast pace of real conversations, but it's also important to remind yourself that improvement comes with time and practice. And sometimes, the key to overcoming this challenge isn't about trying to understand everything immediately, but rather about taking small steps to build your skills, one conversation at a time. In her struggle, Anna learned that the key to overcoming the difficulty of fast speech wasn't necessarily to understand every word, but to understand the overall message. She began to realize that as long as she could get the general meaning, it was okay if she missed a word or two. This shift in mindset helped her feel less pressure to be perfect and gave her the space to focus on improving at her own pace. After months of struggling to keep up with fast conversations, Anna began to feel more and more frustrated. She had tried many different methods, but nothing seemed to work quite as well as she hoped. Still, Anna was determined to improve her listening skills. She knew that if she was going to understand native speakers in real-life conversations, she had to find a way to break through the barrier that was holding her back. One day, after thinking long and hard about her situation, Anna had an idea. She decided to start watching short, informative videos in English, but this time with subtitles. The idea of using subtitles wasn't new to her, but Anna had avoided them in the past. She had always believed that relying on subtitles might slow down her learning process. She thought it would be better to try and understand the spoken English without them, thinking that it would help her to focus more on listening and less on reading. However, after reflecting on her struggles, she realized that she needed a way to connect the spoken word with its written form. She decided that subtitles could help her make this connection and bridge the gap between the spoken and written language. At first, Anna chose to watch videos that were short and to the point. She didn't want to overwhelm herself with long content right away. She started with videos that were both informative and engaging, things that she could easily find online. These videos were typically about topics she was interested in, such as travel, culture, or personal development. The subjects were enjoyable, and the content was clear and simple. This helped her to feel more relaxed and motivated as she worked through the videos. As she watched, Anna made sure to turn on the English subtitles. This was a big change for her, as she had never used subtitles in this way before. She wasn't just reading them to understand the content in her own language, she was reading the English subtitles while listening to the spoken words in English. Anna noticed that having the subtitles enabled her to follow along with the dialogue much more easily. She could hear the words and, at the same time, see them written out. This helped her to connect the sounds with the correct spelling and reinforce the words in her mind. When she didn't catch a word or phrase, the subtitle would fill in the gap, allowing her to fully understand the message. This new approach gave her a sense of security and allowed her to keep up with the pace of the conversation. In the beginning, Anna found it challenging to keep up with the subtitles while also focusing on the speaker's words. Sometimes she would read ahead, missing some of the spoken content, or she would focus so much on the audio that she'd lose track of the text. However, as she practiced, she became better at balancing the two. She began to notice patterns in the way words were spoken and how they connected to their written form. The subtitles helped her not only with the vocabulary, but also with the natural flow of speech. She began to recognize common phrases and expressions, which helped her understand English more naturally. One of the biggest advantages of using subtitles was that Anna could pause and rewind the video whenever she needed to. If she didn't understand something or missed a part of the conversation, she could go back and replay it. This was a huge help because it allowed her to review parts of the video at her own pace. Anna also realized that by listening and reading at the same time, she could improve both her listening comprehension and her reading skills. The connection between the spoken word and its written form was becoming stronger, and this made her more confident in her ability to understand and use English. Another aspect that Anna found helpful was that watching videos with subtitles allowed her to get used to different accents and ways of speaking. English is spoken with a wide variety of accents, and Anna had initially found it difficult to understand different pronunciations. But by listening to content from different regions and cultures, she started to become more accustomed to these variations. For example, one day she watched a video featuring a British speaker, and the next day she watched a video with an American speaker. Each speaker had a different accent, but because she was reading the subtitles and hearing the words clearly, she could more easily pick up on the differences. This gave her a broader understanding of English pronunciation, which helped her feel more comfortable when encountering various accents in real-life conversations. At the same time, Anna also started to pay attention to the way words were used in context. Often she would hear new phrases or idiomatic expressions that weren't necessarily taught in her textbooks. By reading the subtitles, she could understand how those phrases fit into the conversation, which helped her grasp their meaning. This was a valuable learning experience because it showed Anna that English isn't just about individual words. It's also about how those words are used in real-life situations. This helped her feel more connected to the language and gave her a deeper understanding of how English is used in everyday life. As she continued with this practice, Anna noticed a significant improvement in her listening skills. The more she watched these videos, the more comfortable she became with listening to spoken English. She found that she could follow conversations more easily, even when they were spoken quickly. The combination of listening and reading helped her become more accustomed to the rhythm and flow of English, and she began to feel more confident in her ability to understand native speakers. Over time, Anna became less reliant on the subtitles. She found that as her listening skills improved, she didn't need them as much. She would watch videos with subtitles at first, but then challenge herself by turning them off once she felt comfortable. This transition was gradual, but Anna was proud of how far she had come. She could now watch videos and understand most of what was being said without needing the subtitles to guide her. However, she still used them occasionally to reinforce her understanding and check if there were any words or phrases she had missed. Anna's experience with watching videos with subtitles was a turning point in her learning process. It showed her that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to improving your listening skills. For Anna, watching videos with English subtitles was the perfect solution to her struggles. It allowed her to connect what she heard with what she read, and it gave her the confidence she needed to tackle fast-paced conversations in English. This method helped her improve her listening comprehension, build her vocabulary, and become more familiar with natural everyday English. And perhaps most importantly, it showed Anna that small, consistent steps can lead to big improvements. She was no longer intimidated by fast conversations or worried about making mistakes. Instead, she felt empowered to keep learning and to keep improving her English skills. If you're looking to improve your listening skills quickly, one of the best things you can do is start incorporating short videos into your daily routine. I recommend choosing videos that interest you personally. It could be a video about a hobby, a topic you're passionate about, or something that simply makes you laugh. The key here is to find content that motivates you to continue watching. This helps you stay engaged and enjoy the learning process, which is so important when you're working on something as challenging as a new language. Why start with short videos? Well, the beauty of short videos is that they are manageable. You don't need to commit to long hours of watching or listening. In fact, just a few minutes a day can make a big difference when done consistently. And don't worry about feeling overwhelmed. You can always pause the video and take it one step at a time. This approach allows you to take control over the learning process. You can start with videos that are easy to follow and gradually move on to more complex material as you improve. By the time you're watching longer videos, you'll already feel more comfortable with the pace of natural conversations. Another tip that I can't stress enough is to always use subtitles when you start. Subtitles can be a powerful tool when you're learning English, especially if you're in the intermediate stage. This will give you an immediate connection between the spoken and written words, helping you see how the language works in real-life contexts. By using subtitles, you're not just passively listening to the video. you're actively engaging with both the auditory and visual elements of the language. You'll hear the words and simultaneously see how they're written, which helps reinforce your memory and improves both your listening and reading skills. When you're choosing videos, try to pick ones that feature natural, conversational English. These kinds of videos are particularly useful because they will expose you to common phrases, idiomatic expressions, and everyday language that you'll encounter in real-life conversations. The goal here is to familiarize yourself with the way people actually speak, not just textbook English. Listening to native speakers in a relaxed conversational setting will help you get used to the speed, intonation, and rhythm of the language. It's also helpful to pick videos where the speakers talk clearly, but at a natural pace. Sometimes it's tempting to watch content with slow, simplified English, especially when you're just starting out. But if you stick to that too long, it can create a barrier for when you're exposed to faster, more natural speech. Instead, I recommend videos that offer a balanced challenge. The speakers should be clear and easy to understand, but they should also speak at a pace that reflects how English is actually used in everyday life. When you first start watching these videos, you may not catch everything the speakers say, and that's perfectly okay. The important thing is that you're consistently exposing yourself to the language. With each video, you'll start recognizing more and more words and phrases, and eventually you'll be able to understand larger chunks of the conversation. Don't be discouraged if things seem difficult at first. The key is to keep going, even if you only understand a small part of what's being said. Over time, your brain will begin to process the language more efficiently, and listening to English will become easier. Another important thing to keep in mind is that subtitles are not meant to be a crutch. The idea is to gradually reduce your dependence on them as your skills improve. Start with subtitles, but once you feel more confident, challenge yourself by turning them off. At first, this might seem scary, and you might miss some words or details, but it's a necessary step in improving your listening skills. When you remove the subtitles, you force yourself to rely on your listening ability and pay more attention to context, which is how we naturally process language in real life. Don't worry if you don't understand everything. The goal is to improve gradually and steadily. If you find that you're still struggling to understand specific words or phrases, try rewinding the video and listening to those parts again. Repetition is one of the best ways to improve your listening. By replaying certain segments, you're giving your brain more chances to absorb the sounds, the rhythm, and the vocabulary. You'll also be able to pick up on nuances you may have missed the first time around. After a few repetitions, you may even be able to understand the sentence or phrase without needing the subtitles at all. To make the process even more effective, take notes while you're watching. Write down any words, phrases, or expressions that you find interesting or difficult to understand. Look them up later, and make sure to practice using them in your own sentences. This will not only expand your vocabulary, but also help you retain what you've learned. If you encounter a phrase or word that keeps appearing in different videos, that's a sign that it's a common and useful expression. Try to integrate it into your own vocabulary so that you can use it when speaking or writing in English. As you get more comfortable with short videos, try to gradually increase the difficulty level. You can start with videos that use simple language and then move on to those that have more complex vocabulary or cover more advanced topics. Don't jump straight into difficult content too soon, though. It's important to pace yourself and give your brain time to adjust to the new material. By starting small and gradually increasing the difficulty, you ensure that you're not overwhelming yourself and that you're building your listening skills at a steady and manageable pace. This method is highly effective for learners who want to practice in a way that feels natural and enjoyable. It's much easier to stay motivated when you're watching something that you genuinely find interesting, and the consistent exposure to spoken English will help improve your listening skills faster than you might expect. Remember, learning English doesn't have to be a chore. By incorporating enjoyable and relevant content into your routine, you'll not only improve your comprehension, but also make the process more enjoyable. One final tip I want to share is to try watching videos with different accents. English is spoken in many different countries, and each place has its own unique accent and style of speaking. Watching videos from different regions will help you get used to various pronunciations, which is incredibly useful when you're listening to real-life conversations. You might start with content from countries like the United States or the United Kingdom, but as you progress, try including content from places like Australia, Canada, or even non-native English-speaking countries. This will expose you to a wide variety of accents and help you understand English as it's spoken around the world. Incorporating short, subtitle-supported videos into your daily routine is a simple yet powerful way to improve your English listening skills. With consistent practice and dedication, you'll find that your comprehension will improve, and your ability to follow conversations in English will become much easier. Just remember to start small, stay consistent, and make sure to enjoy the process. Every bit of progress you make, no matter how small, brings you one step closer to becoming fluent in English. Luca, a businessman from Milan, found himself facing a challenge that many of you might be able to relate to. Despite his success in his field and his solid knowledge of English, he struggled with understanding fast-paced conversations in business meetings. It wasn't that he didn't know the words, but the speed at which they were spoken made it difficult for him to keep up. This is a problem that many intermediate learners face. It's not about vocabulary or grammar. It's about the rhythm of natural speech and the quick exchange of ideas in real-time conversations. In meetings, Luca often found himself zoning out, trying to catch up with the conversation, only to realize that he had missed the main points. His colleagues, who spoke English fluently, didn't slow down for him. They continued their discussions, unaware that Luca was struggling to follow along. This left him feeling frustrated and, at times, embarrassed. It's a common experience for many learners of English, especially in professional environments where the pressure to communicate clearly and quickly can be overwhelming. Luca's main struggle was understanding complex sentences spoken at a fast pace. It wasn't unusual for him to catch individual words but fail to understand how they all fit together to form a coherent message. In business meetings, this could mean missing out on critical information, from project updates to strategic decisions. As a result, Luca's confidence started to take a hit. He was afraid to speak up or contribute to discussions because he wasn't sure if he would be able to understand everything that was being said. This lack of confidence only made the situation worse, creating a cycle of self-doubt that made it even harder for him to engage in conversations. One of the most frustrating parts for Luca was the feeling of being left behind during fast-paced discussions. His colleagues would speak rapidly, tossing around technical terms and business jargon, and Luca would feel overwhelmed trying to keep up. It wasn't just the speed of the conversation, it was also the use of specific industry language that he didn't fully understand in real time. Even though Luca had a good command of English in general, these conversations often involved phrases that were unfamiliar or used in ways he wasn't accustomed to. In the beginning, Luca tried to push through the discomfort, thinking that with enough practice, he would eventually get used to the fast pace of business English. However, after a few meetings where he still felt lost, he began to doubt his ability to improve. It wasn't just a matter of learning new vocabulary, it was about understanding how the language flowed in these high-pressure, fast-moving environments. This is where Luca's journey became particularly challenging. How could he catch up when everyone else seemed to be miles ahead in terms of fluency? His situation is an example of something many of us face when we're learning a new language. It's easy to feel like we're constantly falling behind. We understand the words and the grammar, but when it comes to keeping up with the speed and flow of native speakers, it's like trying to catch a speeding train. The sense of frustration that comes with this can be incredibly demotivating, especially when the stakes are high, as they often are in professional settings. Luca's challenge didn't just affect his ability to understand his colleagues, it also impacted his confidence in using English. He was afraid of making mistakes or asking someone to repeat themselves too many times. This fear of appearing incompetent or unprepared kept him from speaking up in meetings, which in turn limited his opportunities to practice and improve. It was a vicious cycle. The more he avoided speaking up, the harder it became to participate and practice in the environment where he needed to improve the most. What Luca needed was a way to break through the barrier of speed and complexity that was holding him back. He realized that his struggle wasn't just with English in general, but with understanding English in specific contexts, particularly in his business environment. He knew that if he wanted to improve, he would need to find a method that would help him deal with both the speed and the technical language used in his meetings. This is something that can be difficult to address, especially in a professional context where you might feel too much pressure to perform. But Luca's experience highlights a crucial point. Language learning, especially at the intermediate level, often requires you to adapt your practice to the context in which you need to use the language. For Luca, that meant finding strategies that would allow him to listen more effectively during business meetings without feeling overwhelmed. The solution wasn't to push through in the same way he had been, but to change the way he approached his practice. Luca's story is a powerful reminder that improving our listening skills, especially in professional settings, takes time and specific strategies. You might be familiar with some of the frustrations Luca felt, Perhaps you too have struggled to keep up with fast conversations or found yourself zoning out during meetings. It's a common experience for many learners, but the good news is that there are ways to overcome these challenges, and Luca eventually found a strategy that helped him break through. Luca, a businessman from Milan, shared his story about the constant challenge he faced in business meetings. His primary difficulty wasn't about understanding individual words or basic phrases in English. He was comfortable with the structure and most vocabulary, but the real issue came when his colleagues spoke quickly. In these fast-paced meetings, Luca often found himself struggling to keep up. It wasn't unusual for him to miss entire sentences, or even just the key points that were being discussed. This became a real barrier in his ability to engage fully and contribute confidently. Luca's struggle is a familiar one for many language learners, particularly those who have reached an intermediate level of proficiency, but find themselves stuck when it comes to understanding native speakers in real-world settings. Business environments, with their rapid exchanges and use of specific jargon, present unique challenges that can feel overwhelming. For Luca, these conversations were often too fast to process in real time. As his colleagues, all fluent in English, continued to speak quickly, Luca had to strain to catch up with the conversation. Sometimes he would get distracted trying to figure out one word or phrase, only to realize that he had missed the rest of the discussion. At first, Luca tried to catch up on the go, hoping that with enough time and experience, he would start to keep pace with the flow of conversation. But the more he tried to stay on top of things, the more frustrated he became. It wasn't just the speed of the speech that was difficult for him. It was also the mix of complex phrases and industry-specific terms that made it hard to follow. Even when Luca recognized the words being spoken, he struggled to connect them quickly enough to grasp the full meaning of the message. The faster the conversation moved, the more he felt like he was falling behind. Luca often found himself in situations where he would hear a sentence, understand individual words, but fail to process the sentence as a whole. For example, in a meeting discussing a project update, his colleagues might use phrases like, "Let's circle back to that next quarter," or "We need to leverage our resources." While these were all words Luca knew, he wasn't able to immediately grasp the full meaning or the context in which they were being used. The combination of rapid speech and unfamiliar business jargon left him feeling unsure of himself. This constant struggle had a significant impact on Luca's confidence. He started to hesitate when it was his turn to speak, fearing that he might misunderstand something important. His fear wasn't just about making mistakes, it was about missing out on valuable information. When you're in a business meeting, the last thing you want is to miss key details that could affect the direction of a project or impact a decision you need to make. Luca's insecurity started to affect his performance, as he found himself avoiding speaking up, for fear of not understanding the conversation or not being able to contribute effectively. This situation also made him self-conscious in front of his colleagues. As a businessman, Luca was used to being in control of conversations and leading discussions. But in English meetings, this control slipped away. He couldn't help but feel that his inability to keep up with the conversations reflected poorly on him. This feeling of insecurity was compounded by the fact that his colleagues didn't always notice when he was lost. They spoke naturally without adjusting their speed or simplifying their language, which made Luca's struggle all the more apparent to him. Luca's situation is a good example of how quickly spoken English can challenge even those who are relatively proficient in the language. It's not always about not knowing the words or the grammar. It's about processing information quickly enough to follow along in a fast-paced environment. For Luca, the issue wasn't that he couldn't understand English. It was that the pace of business meetings, combined with complex language, made it difficult for him to process everything in real time. This is a challenge that many intermediate learners of English face, and it's one that can be particularly frustrating in professional settings. When it comes to conversations in a second language, many learners experience a gap between their ability to understand slow, clear speech and their ability to understand fast, natural speech. In the case of Luca, even though he had a good grasp of English in theory, the practical challenge of listening to and processing fast conversations was a different story. This is a common issue for people who are working on improving their listening skills at an intermediate level. It's easy to feel left behind when the people around you are speaking rapidly and using expressions or idioms that are unfamiliar. As a result, Luca's main concern was his inability to contribute meaningfully in these meetings. He knew that his colleagues might have valuable insights, but the speed of their speech made it difficult for him to engage fully. This frustration often led to him holding back, hoping that the conversation would slow down or that someone would pause to give him a chance to catch up. But in most cases, the conversations moved forward without taking his pace into account. Luca's struggle to understand these fast conversations wasn't just about missing information. It was about feeling disconnected from the flow of the discussion, which eventually affected his performance in the meetings. What Luca learned through this experience is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution for improving listening comprehension, especially in challenging environments like business meetings. It's not enough to simply study vocabulary or grammar. Learners need strategies that will help them navigate the complexities of natural, rapid speech. Luca's experience shows that to truly improve listening skills, especially in professional settings, learners must focus not only on vocabulary and grammar, but also on the practical aspects of communication, such as understanding context, tone, and the speed at which information is shared. Luca, after experiencing frustration during business meetings and struggling to keep up with fast conversations, realized that his approach to improving his listening skills needed a change. He understood that he had to immerse himself more in English, especially in contexts that reflected the professional setting he worked in. The first step Luca took was to incorporate English listening practice into his daily routine, without feeling overwhelmed by the idea of spending hours studying. He wanted to find a way to improve his listening skills while also fitting it into his already busy schedule. One day during his commute to work, Luca decided to listen to podcasts. He had heard many people recommend podcasts as a great tool for language learning, but he had never given them much thought. The idea of listening to a podcast during his daily drive to the office seemed like a practical solution that wouldn't require him to make extra time for studying. Instead of worrying about finding hours to practice, Luca figured he could make use of the time he already spent commuting, turning it into an opportunity to improve his English skills. Luca started by choosing podcasts that were related to his field of work. Since he worked in the tech industry, he looked for podcasts that discussed the latest trends, innovations, and news in technology. He knew that focusing on topics that were already familiar to him would help him feel more comfortable and confident. At first, he focused on podcasts that were relatively slow-paced, where the speakers used clear and concise language. As he continued to listen, Luca gradually became more accustomed to hearing the technical vocabulary and industry-specific terms, which had been some of the main challenges he faced during his meetings. Listening to podcasts during his daily commute became part of Luca's routine. Every morning, while driving to work or on his way back home, Luca would choose a podcast episode that was around 20 to 30 minutes long. This fit perfectly into his daily travel time, and it allowed him to make the most of what would otherwise be wasted time. It didn't matter if the podcast was in the form of an interview, a discussion, or a solo talk. The key for Luca was that he was hearing authentic English used in a professional context. In the beginning, Luca found it a bit challenging. The pace of the speakers was still faster than what he was used to, and sometimes he had to replay parts of the podcast to catch a word or phrase he missed. But instead of feeling discouraged, Luca remained determined to stick with it. He realized that this was exactly the type of listening practice he needed. By listening to podcasts regularly, he began to tune his ear to the natural rhythm and flow of spoken English, particularly in the context of his profession. He could hear not only the content, but also the subtleties of pronunciation, intonation, and stress, which made a huge difference when he returned to his business meetings. After a few weeks, Luca started to notice improvements. He found that he could understand more of the conversations in his meetings. He was still not 100% confident, but the gap had definitely narrowed. The exposure to different accents and speaking speeds in the podcasts helped Luca become more adaptable. He no longer felt as stressed when people spoke quickly in meetings because he had already practiced listening to faster-paced content in a variety of formats. The more he listened, the more his brain adapted to understanding English in real time. One of the most significant benefits Luca experienced was that listening to podcasts became a way for him to engage with content that was relevant to his job. Rather than simply listening to random English materials, Luca had tailored his listening practice to focus on topics that were both practical and interesting to him. This made the experience much more engaging and motivating. He was not just passively listening to English for the sake of learning, he was actively developing his professional skills while improving his English comprehension. The podcasts Luca chose often featured interviews with experts in the tech field, discussions about new innovations, and insights into industry trends. The topics were not only relevant to his work, but they also helped him stay updated on important developments. As he became more familiar with the content and language, Luca found that he could easily pick up on more technical terms and phrases that were commonly used in his industry. This gave him an edge during business discussions, as he felt more comfortable with the terminology and able to follow the conversation more easily. Listening to podcasts also helped Luca understand various accents and ways of speaking in English. He started to notice how native speakers from different countries use different expressions and spoke with different rhythms. This was crucial for him because in his international company, he had colleagues from various parts of the world. While some of his colleagues spoke with a British accent, others had American, Australian, or even Irish accents. At first, Luca had trouble understanding the differences in pronunciation, but by regularly listening to podcasts, he became more adept at identifying these accents and understanding the subtle variations. Through this consistent practice, Luca not only improved his listening comprehension, but he also gained more confidence in his ability to contribute to discussions in meetings. He stopped worrying as much about missing out on key points or not understanding fast speech. By turning his daily commute into an opportunity for improvement, Luca had found a simple yet effective way to practice English. What started as a small change, listening to podcasts during his daily travel, had become an essential part of his English learning journey. One of the things Luca appreciated the most was that he could listen to the podcasts anytime, whether on his way to work, while waiting for a meeting, or during a break. The flexibility of podcasts allowed him to engage with the language as part of his everyday routine. This consistent exposure to English, particularly in a context that was directly relevant to his work, helped him bridge the gap between classroom learning and real-world application. For Luca, the key takeaway was that learning doesn't always need to happen in a structured, formal setting. By using small, manageable moments throughout the day to practice listening, he was able to gradually build his confidence and improve his skills. He learned that in order to truly become comfortable with English, it's essential to integrate the language into your everyday life, whether through podcasts, movies, conversations, or other forms of media. In today's episode, I want to share a powerful and practical tip with you that can significantly boost your listening skills in English. The key is to listen to content that is relevant to your own life and context. This can include podcasts, audiobooks, or any other form of spoken content that aligns with your daily activities, work, or personal interests. The idea is to make listening practice a more natural part of your routine by immersing yourself in topics that you are passionate about or that directly relate to your job, hobbies, or daily life. When you choose content that is connected to your reality, it becomes much easier to stay engaged and motivated. After all, learning a language is not just about understanding words and grammar, but also about connecting the language to your real-life experiences. The more relevant the material is to you, the more enjoyable and beneficial the process becomes. And when you're learning in this way, you will not only improve your listening comprehension, but also expand your vocabulary and gain a deeper understanding of how English is used in different contexts. For example, let's say you work in marketing. Instead of just listening to general English language podcasts, you could tune into podcasts that focus on marketing trends, case studies, and interviews with industry professionals. This way, you're not just practicing your listening skills, you're also learning new vocabulary and expressions that are directly related to your work. You can hear how native speakers discuss industry-specific topics, and over time, you'll become more comfortable with the language used in your professional environment. This type of listening practice also helps you get used to the fast pace of conversations and discussions that often happen in business settings. If you're a student, you might find it helpful to listen to podcasts or audiobooks that focus on topics relevant to your studies. Whether it's literature, history, science, or any other subject, listening to content in English that covers your academic interests can improve both your comprehension and retention of the material. Imagine reading an article or textbook in your native language, but listening to a podcast in English about the same topic. This will help reinforce your understanding of the subject matter while simultaneously boosting your language skills. You'll get used to the way technical terms and concepts are discussed in English, which can make your learning process much more efficient. Now let's talk about those of you who might have personal interests or hobbies that you're passionate about. Maybe you love cooking, sports, travel, or photography. You can find English language content related to these interests as well. For example, if you're interested in cooking, you can listen to cooking shows, recipe podcasts, or even follow YouTube channels in English. The same goes for any other hobby or activity you enjoy. Whether it's travel podcasts, sports commentary, or photography tips, listening to content that excites you will make the learning process much more enjoyable. One of the biggest advantages of this approach is that it keeps your practice interesting and sustainable. Let's face it, learning a language can be challenging, and if you're constantly studying materials that don't spark your interest, it can become boring and tedious. But when the content you listen to is something you're genuinely excited about, or something that directly benefits you in your personal or professional life, it transforms learning into something fun and rewarding. It no longer feels like a chore. Instead, it becomes a natural extension of your day-to-day life. The beauty of listening to relevant content is that it also helps you learn English in context. It's one thing to study grammar rules or memorize vocabulary lists, but it's a whole different experience when you hear words and phrases used in real-world conversations. You get to hear how native speakers naturally interact with each other, how they express emotions, share opinions, and make jokes. This type of exposure helps you understand the nuances of the language, including slang, idiomatic expressions, and cultural references that might not be found in traditional textbooks. For instance, if you're listening to a podcast about marketing trends, you might hear expressions like content strategy, customer engagement, or brand awareness. These words may sound simple, but in the context of a marketing conversation, they carry specific meanings and connotations that are important to grasp. By hearing these words used in context, you not only learn what they mean, but also how they fit into a larger discussion. This kind of learning helps you develop the ability to understand spoken English in a more natural, fluid way. Another benefit of listening to content relevant to your life is that it can help you prepare for real-life situations. If you're listening to English language content related to your work or hobbies, you're essentially rehearsing for the types of conversations you might have in those areas. This is incredibly useful because it allows you to feel more confident when you need to use English in similar situations. Let's say you're a photographer and you're listening to interviews with professional photographers in English. Not only will you be improving your listening skills, but you'll also be preparing yourself to have similar conversations in real life. When the opportunity arises to talk about photography in English, you'll already be familiar with the vocabulary, phrases, and expressions used in that context. Listening to relevant content also enables you to gradually build your skills without feeling overwhelmed. You don't have to jump straight into complex topics or difficult material. Start with content that is relatively easy to understand and aligned with your interests. As you get more comfortable, you can gradually increase the level of difficulty. You might start with simpler podcasts or audiobooks, and as your skills improve, move on to more challenging content. This step-by-step approach makes the learning process less intimidating and allows you to progress at your own pace. One of the keys to making this strategy work is consistency. Just like with any other language skill, the more you listen, the better you'll become. By making relevant content a regular part of your routine, you'll steadily improve your listening comprehension without even realizing it. Whether it's listening during your commute, while cooking, or during a workout, these small moments of practice will add up over time. Ultimately, by listening to content that speaks to your personal interests and life experiences, you're not just practicing English, you're also making the process more meaningful and enjoyable. The better you understand the context in which language is used, the more confident you'll become in using English yourself. So, take the time to explore podcasts, audiobooks, and other forms of content that align with your interests. By doing so, you'll create a listening routine that not only improves your English skills, but also helps you feel more connected to the language in your everyday life. As we continue our conversation today, I want to take a moment to reflect on your own listening practice. I know that everyone's learning journey is unique, and that means we all have different ways of practicing and improving our skills. So, I'd like to ask you, what do you currently do to improve your English listening skills? Do you listen to podcasts, watch videos, or movies? Perhaps you've already tried some of the strategies we've discussed so far. Or maybe you've discovered some methods that work particularly well for you. Whatever it may be, I'd love for you to think about how you've been practicing and what you can do next to enhance your understanding of spoken English. I'm sure many of you have been actively working on your listening skills in one way or another, whether it's through formal lessons or simply by exposing yourselves to English in your daily life. It's not always easy, and it certainly requires patience, but the effort you put into it can make a huge difference. So, I want you to take a moment right now and think about your current routine. How much time do you spend each day listening to English? Are you listening to content that interests you, or are you simply practicing with material that feels like a chore? Reflecting on these questions will help you see where you are in your learning process and what steps you can take to improve. For example, let's consider a few scenarios. Maybe you're someone who enjoys listening to music in English. Have you ever tried to pay close attention to the lyrics and understand them without reading the lyrics first? It's a great exercise to help train your ear. If you haven't tried this, give it a go. Try listening to a song you like, and instead of looking at the lyrics, see if you can catch the meaning just by hearing the words. This type of practice helps improve your listening comprehension and gives you a sense of accomplishment when you can understand a song without needing to read along. Or maybe you enjoy watching movies and TV shows in English. If you haven't yet started, try watching with subtitles in English. This way you can match the spoken words with their written form. It's one of the most effective ways to connect what you hear with how it's written, which will improve both your listening and reading skills. I understand that it can be tempting to switch to your native language subtitles, but try to resist that temptation. The challenge will be worth it in the long run. As you get used to hearing the language, you'll find yourself picking up on more details and understanding conversations more easily. If you're already using some of these methods, fantastic. But here's something to think about. Are you being consistent? Consistency is key when it comes to improving your listening skills. Are you setting aside regular time to listen to English every day, even if it's just for 15 or 20 minutes? You'd be surprised how much progress you can make by dedicating a small chunk of time each day to listening. Maybe you could listen during your daily commute, while cooking, or even while exercising. Incorporating English into your daily routine makes it a natural part of your life and helps you stay on track with your practice. Now, here's where you have a chance to take action. After listening to this episode, I encourage you to reflect on what changes you can make to your listening practice. Are there new habits or routines you can build to include more English in your day-to-day life? Maybe it's listening to a podcast that focuses on a topic you're passionate about, or perhaps you could start listening to news reports in English to improve your ability to follow current events in the language. There are so many options out there, and the best part is that you can make your practice work for you and your lifestyle. I also encourage you to share your experiences with me and the rest of our community. Have you tried any of the tips from today's episode? What's been working for you, and what challenges have you encountered along the way? If you've found a technique that has helped you improve your listening skills, I'd love to hear about it. We can all learn from each other's experiences, and your input might inspire others in our community who are facing similar challenges. So, feel free to reach out and share your journey. Remember, learning a language is a shared experience, and we're all in this together. As we wrap up today's discussion, I want to remind you that listening practice doesn't need to be complicated or time-consuming. The key is to find content that interests you, incorporate it into your routine, and make it a regular part of your day. Start with small, manageable steps and build from there. Over time, you'll see improvements in your listening comprehension, and you'll feel more confident in understanding spoken English, whether it's in casual conversations or professional settings. I hope today's episode has inspired you to take action and make listening practice a bigger part of your language learning journey. And remember, it's not about perfection, it's about progress. The more you listen, the more you'll learn, and the closer you'll get to mastering English. Keep practicing, stay motivated, and most importantly, have fun with it. As we come to the end of today's episode, let's take a moment to review the key tips we've discussed and think about how you can start applying them in your everyday life to improve your listening skills in English. The first point we covered was the power of listening regularly. This is one of the most crucial steps you can take to improve your understanding of spoken English. You don't need to dedicate hours every day. Even just a few minutes a day can make a huge difference. The key is consistency. By making listening a regular part of your routine, whether it's during your commute, while cooking, or while relaxing, you're gradually training your brain to become more accustomed to the sounds, rhythms, and nuances of the language. We also talked about the importance of starting with content that interests you. This is essential because when you're engaged with the material, it's much easier to stay motivated and keep practicing. Whether it's podcasts, YouTube videos, movies, or TV shows, choosing content that you enjoy ensures that the process feels more like a hobby than a chore. Plus, you're more likely to stick with it if the material aligns with your personal interests, whether that's business, travel, culture, or anything else that sparks your curiosity. When you listen to content that speaks to your interests, you naturally want to understand more, which fuels your desire to keep learning. We also discussed the value of using subtitles, especially when you're just starting out or if you're struggling to catch every word. By watching videos or listening to podcasts with subtitles, you can match what you hear to the written word, which helps reinforce your learning. This is a fantastic strategy for improving both listening and reading comprehension, and it's especially helpful when dealing with fast speech or unfamiliar accents. Over time, as your listening improves, You can gradually decrease your reliance on subtitles and challenge yourself to understand the content without them. Next, we touched on the importance of variety in your listening practice. You don't have to stick to just one type of content. Mix it up. Listen to different accents, different speeds of speech, and different types of English, whether it's conversational English, business English, or English used in more formal settings. The more diverse your listening practice is, the more adaptable you'll become to different ways of speaking. You might start by listening to podcasts in a more relaxed setting, then challenge yourself with news broadcasts or business-related podcasts that require you to focus on specific vocabulary and more formal language structures. Additionally, we discussed how using short, manageable chunks of content is a great way to avoid feeling overwhelmed. Starting with shorter videos or podcast episodes, particularly those under 10 minutes, can give you the chance to practice actively without committing to long periods of time. This makes the learning process feel less intimidating and more achievable. Over time, as you become more comfortable with listening, you can gradually increase the length and complexity of the material you consume. I also want to emphasize the importance of reflecting on your own practice. We've all been there, struggling to understand a fast conversation or missing key details in a podcast. But the most important thing is to keep going. It's not about getting everything perfect. It's about making continuous progress. So I encourage you to reflect on what you're already doing to improve your listening. Are there specific techniques or tools that have been working for you? Are there areas where you feel like you could use a little more practice? Use these reflections to guide your next steps. Setting small goals for yourself, like understanding a certain percentage of a podcast episode without needing to rewind, can be a great way to track progress and stay motivated. Finally, I want to remind you that listening is not a passive activity. It's an active skill that requires engagement and focus. As you listen, try to actively think about what you're hearing, ask yourself questions about the content, repeat key phrases or words that are important, and challenge yourself to understand new expressions or idioms. This active approach to listening will not only improve your comprehension, but also help you retain new information more effectively. The journey to improving your listening skills in English is not something that happens overnight, but with consistent effort, it's definitely something you can achieve. The tips we've discussed today, such as regular listening, choosing content that interests you, using subtitles, and mixing up your practice, will give you a solid foundation for improving your English listening skills. Just remember, the more you expose yourself to the language, the easier it becomes to understand it in different contexts. So, take a moment to think about how you can incorporate these tips into your daily routine. Start by setting aside a few minutes each day for active listening, choose content that excites you, and gradually challenge yourself with more complex material. And don't forget, your progress will happen gradually, and every little step counts. Keep practicing, stay consistent, and most importantly, enjoy the process. You've got this.